Hi everyone, it's Laura here and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video I'm gonna show you 3 different ways in which you can add texture to your cards to make them look even more interesting. To start off this card, I die cut a piece of Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolor cardstock to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches using the Lawn Fawn large stitched rectangle stackable dies. And now I am doing some ink blending over this panel using my Distress Oxide in Blueprint sketch. This is one of the colors that has been released this year and I am absolutely in love with it. I think it looks really beautiful. And you will see how even more beautiful it looks now that I'm adding some water splashes. To add these water droplets, I am using a distress sprayer. I will leave the water a few seconds so that it has time to activate the Distress Oxide, and then I will blot it dry with a paper towel. I then moved on to the next step, and this will be the first way in which I will be adding texture to this card. That is by using a stencil by Create Smile Stamps and my Nuvo Glimmer paste in Moonstone. And if you are watching this video in May 2018, just a little FYI for you that this stencil, together with other stencils, is currently on a 50% off sale on the Create a Smile Stamp store. So if you have been eyeing these stencils for a while, this might be a good chance for you to get them at a great price. But coming back to the card, I taped the stencil to my card base using some washi tape, as you saw a while ago, and I am now using a spatula to apply the glimmer paste through the stencil all over my card base. And this was the first time for me using this product, and let me tell you, I really love it. It's super shimmery and beautiful, and it also kind of reacts with the Distress Oxide, so it kind of tones it down a little bit and it creates a really gorgeous effect on the card base. Once I covered the entire panel with the glimmer paste, I carefully removed the stencil, paying attention not to smear the glimmer paste because I didn't want obviously to ruin the panel at this point. And then I immediately cleaned my mat and went off to my sink to rinse the residual glimmer paste off my stencil and of my spatula. And you really have to wash your tools and your work surface right away, because once this product dries, it's going to be, I guess, nearly impossible to remove it from your tools. For the next element on my card, I cut some more Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolor cardstock using the Create a Smile Stamps Pierce banner dies, and I will be using Distress Oxides and the ink smooshing technique to add texture to this panel. And I am using Twisted Citron and Squeezed Lemonade, and as you see right now, what I'm doing is I am pressing the ink pad onto my Tonic Studios Easy Clean mat. I am activating the ink with water, and then I am basically applying my panel face down onto the ink so that it picks up the pigment. And I will keep repeating this step until I get a nice enough texture, just making sure to dry the panel between each application. And here I am just dabbing off a little bit of color because I got too much yellow on the panel. I wanted this to be predominantly green. So I basically reactivated the Distress Oxide with water, dabbed it off with a paper towel, and now I am coming back in with the Twisted Citron again. I am drying this layer too with my heat gun, and after that I will be using a paintbrush and the Distress Oxide in Twisted Citron again to add some fine splatters to the background. And these techniques that I showed you with the Distress Oxides are another way to add texture to your backgrounds, this time without adding dimension. To introduce a little bit more green on my banner, I used Distress Oxide in Twisted Citron again, but this time I am ink blending it on the edges of the banner using my Ranger Mini Ink Blender. And then I could move on and color my images. For today's card, I am using this super fun, super cute hippo. This is from the Creators Mouse Stamps Served Up stamp set. And I stamped it with Memento Tuxedo Black ink on some Nina Solar White cardstock. I had the image already pre-cut in my stash, and now I am coloring it with my Copic markers. I am adding the shadows as if the light source is on the top right corner, so that the shadows will be mostly focused on the bottom left part of the images. I am also paying attention to cast shadows. These are shadows that are projected by objects which stand in front of other objects. So for example, there will be a shadow cast by the napkin onto the hippo's body. The muzzle, because it's protruding, will cast a shadow on the hippo's head. The bow tie will cast a shadow on his body, and the serving tray will shadow part of his hand. And I will keep adding shadows, keeping these things in mind, and keep blending the colors until I get the smoothness that I want and the color depth that I'm going for. I will leave you now with some music while I finish coloring the skin of the hippo, but I'll be back soon because I will be showing you here the third way in which I add the texture to this project, which is through the image that I'm coloring right now. So I will tell you a little bit more about that when we get there. At this point, I am done with coloring the hippo skin, but I will be using and showing you an easy technique to add a little bit more texture to it. This basically consists in adding dots to the shadow areas only using a dark Copic marker. In this case, I first went in with the W5, which is the same warm gray marker that I used for my shadow areas, but then I felt it was a little bit too light. So I first went in with the W7, which is a little bit darker, and to soften up those dots, because now I felt they were a little bit too dark, I went back in with the W5 over the same areas again, and then I blended everything out, basically adding an extra layer of this warm gray marker. And this is a very simple technique that allows you to add texture to your cards through your stamped images. You just want to be careful not to add too many dots and to only add them to selected areas. And in this case, the result is pretty subtle, but I have another video on my channel where I show basically the same technique, so adding shadows or increasing texture on your shadows using this dotting technique. So I will be linking that at the end of this video and in the description box down below in case you wanna check it out. But now I will leave you again with a little bit of more music while I finish coloring the hippo, and I will be back when it's time to put the card together. At this point, the last element I need on my card is the sentiment, and for that I decided to do some heat embossing with white embossing powder over some black cardstock. The sentiment I pick reads "Treat Yourself", and it is from the same Creators Mouse Stamps Served Up stamp set. I stamped it with Versamark ink, coated it with white embossing powder, this is by Ranger. I dabbed off the excess and then I melted the embossing powder with my heat gun. Once the embossing powder was melted and had cooled down a little bit, I used my guillotine trimmer by Tonic Studios to trim down a thin strip, and then I could move on and started assembling all my elements on my card base. I used some 3M foam tape to pop up my banner onto my card base to create some nice dimension on my card, and also to make sure that the banner would be nicely stuck down onto the textured card base. Once I had that in place, I could go ahead and adhere the sentiment strip. And I am measuring where I want my sentiment to be so that I know where I have to put foam tape, because I need to support the parts of the strip that hang off the banner. So once I have my foam tape in place, I can go ahead, remove the backing, and I will also be adding some glue to the central part of the strip so that that part is adhered to the banner. And this is some Nouveau Deluxe adhesive. I will use my Tonic Studios scissors to trim off the excess. And again the Nouveau Deluxe adhesive to adhere the hippo to my card base. I am adhering him in a way that he hangs off the banner a little bit for some added interest. And finally I'll be adding the champagne glasses on top of the serving tray. As a final touch, I am using my glossy accents to add some shine and dimension to the champagne glasses. I will add it to all 4 of them, and that will finish off my card. And before I go, I just wanted to show you how pretty and shimmery this glimmer paste is once it catches the light. It's really gorgeous. And that's it for today. If you guys enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments below, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. You can visit my blog for the full list of supplies, and I'll catch you guys soon with the next one. Ciao!